Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. I am an educator of leaders. So working with big business around the world on the topic of sustainability leadership gives me one of them kind of complicated jobs that's really hard to explain to people. But when someone from outside of my little bubble asks me, what do you do? I simply say, I strive to change people's minds for a living. I'm in the business of mindset shifts. And I think in everything that I've done to date, I'm confronted at this point in my career with a difficult truth. A lot of what we're doing isn't enough. Because while mindset shift is important and coming to be educated is important, what is equally as important for leaders is to let go of long-held beliefs and undertake what I think of as the painful process of unlearning. So today you would expect me to be standing here with the perfectly polished 10-point plan on how to do sustainability leadership. I'm going to upfront just massively disappoint you all. I'm not going to do that today. Instead, I'm going to take a little step outside of my comfort zone and talk instead about how I think change in the world actually happens. And it happens when we mobilize the majority, which is currently deeply caring about what's happening in the world, but in a bit of paralysis for action. We call this the missing middle. How do we help the missing middle see its power and to use it? So, like many of you in my career, I've put myself in the way of what I have very much hoped have been the best opportunities and the greatest opportunities to have positive impact on the planet. And nothing I have done or my peers or the businesses I work with have got close to addressing the scale of the challenge that we are facing. Despite all of the net zero targets, emissions continue to rise, as do global temperatures. We have a critical dependence on nature, which we are destroying at record speed. And the social aspects of sustainability, the injustice is continuing to deepen. It's the parts of the world that contribute the least in terms of emissions that are going to lose the most in a climate crisis, largely poor populations. So as the realities of living in a 1.5 degree warmed world persist, the injustices abound. And we have a pretty long list of what it takes not to change the world. This is mainly focused on our lessons from engaging with business, but I think we can probably extrapolate this to see what's not going to help when trying to engage the majority and the masses and this missing middle, as we call it. We've terrified people with science. We've put up scary graphs and expected that to do the trick. But the opponents of change have been more compelling. We put science next to disinformation, and we've largely lost. We've tried moral appeals. I call this the what about your grandkids, what about the polar bears era of sustainability. And that was seen as a bit, soft, a bit uncommercial. And then we've painted these utopian pictures of what the world could look like. And that gained a little bit of traction, but it just didn't translate to real world action. So we're faced with this very uneasy truth. We are not meeting the scale of the challenge presented to us. That's a little bit depressing. And we're at a moment in time where the debate is highly politicized. You'll know this from looking at your news feeds in the day-to-day. Everyone is trying to grab your attention with the most polarizing, the most provocative views. But the interesting thing about everyone, whether they're the defenders of the status quo or the mavericks that celebrate breaking every rule, they're all vying for one thing, and that is the attention of the majority in between. The real contest is for the middle. It is not a united force. It is a diverse and complex and often quite divided group. But again and again, history tells us that the majority is the decisive force. It was not policy that changed things in history. Big systemic shifts happen when civil society moves and normalizes change. It was citizens that voted to end the slave trade. It was citizens that demanded clean air and refused to breathe secondhand smoke. It was citizens that supported women's rights to vote. And I stand in these grand Cambridge University halls. Other universities are available. And I speak to executives. And I stand in halls where women weren't allowed to graduate until as late as the 1980s. Not 1880s, 1980s. And that usually receives this sharp intake of breath. And I always counter that with the audience and say, what will the leaders 40 years from now say about us with the same sharp intakes of breath, about the common sense ways we should be dismantling what we think of just now as normal, the status quo. What can be done about that in the future for future leaders? So we know the middle and the majority is the decisive force. So what's the problem? Why aren't we acting? Is it that people just don't care? Fortunately, all the evidence suggests that people do care. People care very deeply. And of course, there's parts of the world where people are less concerned with where to plug in their electric vehicle and probably more, how to feed my family. So those parts of the world are suffering the consequences of inaction from parts of the world that could feasibly lead. Parts of the world like the UK. And a recent study by a group called More in Common on British attitudes found that the British people care a lot about the future and they're worried about it. We are a nation that loves nature and we want to protect our environment. So why aren't we acting? I've got a few reasons to share as to why people aren't acting. There was another global study by Nature Climate Change, and this is a global one. And it said, people are really concerned, but they consistently underestimate how much their peers support climate action. So in other words, they care. They just assume others don't. This is a common one. People feel this sense of overwhelm. The problem's too big. There's nothing I can do. And it didn't help that over the last decade, there's been a huge amount of activity from business and even at a household level on sustainability. So recycling more, less single-use plastic, even considering solar panels for your houses. But nothing was enough. And when the science said we've not made enough progress, momentum stalled and confidence faltered. The very real reality is that whether you're speaking up for something or against something, the debate is so highly politicized that people fear being attacked for their opinions and their points of view. We hear this a lot from business. We're scared of speaking up because we don't want to have a target put on our backs. The stories of the future are told by people who don't understand the realities of their audience. A lot of the time, citizens will say, well, business just needs to do more, without recognizing they will be punished in the markets for doing so. And everyone looks to society and assumes that they would like to live in like these sci-fi cities and rural havens, but that really doesn't translate to how people live and the communities in the day-to-day. So people look at their choices and they feel stuck. The middle is missing and it's paralyzed. It doesn't know where to go next. It doesn't know what to do. But because it is the galvanizing force, we must find a way through to activate the missing middle, to see its power and to use it. So what could work? Government, I hear you roar. Of course, we're talking about changing economies here. It's quite macro. Government is going to have to get involved whatever geography we're talking about in the world. Government won't act unless there's enough momentum, unless they think that citizens and businesses will support action. So it's really important at this moment in time that people become more visible and show that momentum is happening. Focusing on credible possibility. The middle is sick of all of our BS. The middle has been lied to. The middle is overwhelmed with information, these polarizing, provocative headlines. So instead, why don't we focus on small things that are achievable and build trust with the majority, don't alienate them. We can build coalitions beyond our specific little bubbles. Not only is this incredibly rewarding, and we hear this from business, they can partner with even apparent opponents, and it creates this rich conversation where you're seen through a different lens and a different perspective. And if people see unfamiliar collaborations happening, it makes it look less niche and more mainstream. Removing the barriers. Simply put, for business, this is price, finances, and the market. And for citizens and households, that is cost, complexity, and convenience. Making momentum visible. This is a party that is already happening. We don't want this to be, oh, sustainability, it's a bit hard. This is shaping basically the economies of the future that we all have to live in. It should be something that gets us really excited and proud. And we should show that momentum is already happening. The party is underway. Normalizing action through mainstream voices, put real people with microphones in their hand having conversations. Use stories as a strategic asset. Signal where you are going, that the direction of travel is in place, that momentum is happening, and if in doubt, if things aren't moving quickly, you can test things in small projects to evidence the case that action and traction is going to occur. But I think storytelling, if anything you hear today, storytelling is a secret power that we need to get much better at harnessing. So if you recognize yourself in anything that I've said today as part of this missing middle, the majority that deeply cares about what's going on in the world but feels like you can't act, what would it take for you to see your power and to use it? What would it take for you to speak up so that others could see themselves too? And is it possible we could move from this sort of swinging pendulum between optimism of utopias and dystopian pessimism and just settle somewhere like Possibilism? I'm a very proud Hebridean Scottish Islander, and I'd love to leave you with a couple of quotes that I think resonate with me when it comes to thinking about leadership. And these kind of things keep me going, a couple of ideas around leadership. I get inspiration from the same places as most people do, from family, friends, standing in rooms like this with people like you, but also from the mountains and from the sea. These are part of my DNA. And when you look at the sea, a good navigator doesn't chart the course on a boat looking at yesterday's conditions. They look at what's actually going to be happening in the future. So if you use science for everything, use it to predict what is going to come ahead, because history teaches us some valuable lessons about change and how it doesn't happen, but we need to be really realistic in navigating this future. We cannot assume past success will keep us safe. And then to the hills, happy place. The leadership fact is you do not climb the hill to be seen from the top. That's not leadership. You climb for the pursuit of the view, the clarity that it provides you, and the ability to make better decisions with a vantage point, considering in all different angles and aspects of society. That is the point. It is the pursuit of the view, not being seen from the top. And there's a great poem called Legacy by Rupi Kaur, which I will leave you with, and that is, I stand on the sacrifices of 1 million women before me, thinking, how can I make this mountain taller so that women after me can see further? Thank you so much. Thank you.